got fortunate to have Ceri Lewis, General Manager at Mount Linton. Mount Linton, as many of you will be aware, is one of New Zealand's iconic stations in South Westland, covering about just over 30,000 acres. It's home to 45,000 Romney Texels sheep and 3,000 Angus cows. And as we're all aware, Mount Linton has been doing exceptionally well at BFEQ, and we're here to find out how. So, Ceri, thanks very much for your time.
Thanks very much, Graham, for the intro. It's actually Western Southland, not South Westland, but we won't hold that against you. Because I've got a day job as well, I was in a bit of a rush when I put this presentation together, so I've got a few notes that I've made that go with it. So the first thing is the breeding objectives we have at Mount Linton, and it sort of rolls on into how we've been doing with the BFEQ stuff. The first one is the most important thing for us is we want to breed cattle that lower the cost of production. So that photo up there is some of the country that we winter our cattle in. They don't no supplement at all over the winter, so we need to make sure that our cows are robust enough to be able to get through those difficult winters that we have without any supplement, because the distances we go to out the back is about 28 k's out the back, and there's just no possibility of being able to get any supplement out to them. So cows at Mount Linton need to get in calf every year in 2 cycles. They need to rear a calf every year, and we're at the moment we're part of a beef cow efficiency trial funded by Beef and Lamb that Steve is leading, and Anna is the driving, and some interesting statistics coming out of there in that some of our cows lost 150 kilos from the weaning weight through till pre-calving over the winter. They then regained 150 kilos from pre-calving through to pre-mating, which was about 90 days. And then they also lost another 30 to 40 kilos while they had that calf on them from calf marking through till weaning again. So those animals have got to be able to utilize the fat on their backs to milk off and also to get back in calf. So maternal efficiency and fertility, obviously we're all well aware of the work that Wayne's done with his productivity trials over there, and we're very keen on positive fats. I know it's not everyone's cup of tea, but it works for us. So when we're selecting bulls, one of the key things for us is that they need to be positive, particularly rib fat. I know that we've used bulls in the past that have been slightly negative for rib and rump fat, and then their figures have changed quite a bit and they become very negative, and those cattle fall out of our system. We just can't get them back in calf. The other thing that's really important for us is days to calving, EBV. Again, that work that Wayne's been doing is pretty crucial. The days to calving EBV of +5 was 55% in calf in 6 weeks, and the days to calving EBV of -7, 92% in calf in 6 weeks. So it's pretty crucial. The role of fat and EMA in our system is pretty important, but I'm pretty conscious of having too much fat in the system and being able to negate that by using bulls with high EMAs. So most of the bulls I use are at least double breed average for EMA to try and compensate for the fat. The mature pattern, very important again for us. You know, increasing the trends in growth, muscling, marbling and fat using EBVs is pretty straightforward. But the challenge ahead of us is to control the frame size of our cows. It's a fundamental, and it has huge influence on how they handle the big variations in seasonal climate conditions. This slide here is, there are two summary reports. One of them is from 2014, which is the one on the left-hand side, and the other one is from 2015. So the one on the left-hand side is from August, and the one on the right-hand side is from June. So the one on the left-hand side illustrates basically how we've progressed in 12 months. The little green line on the top, just up here, is how many fell within the master grade, and the one on the right-hand side of 21 is how many fell out. So we're about roughly just under 50% made the master grade there. They'd been on fodder beet for 90 days, so what we found is the longer they've been on fodder beet, usually the better they marble. But you can see that the arrow on the left-hand side column, which is just here, shows that the marbling was just at the bottom end of the high. And then on the sheet on the right-hand side, you can see that the marbling is significantly higher in 12 months' time, and they'd only been on fodder beet for 30 days. So the effect of the marbling genetically over one season basically is considerably improved. So the optimum range is the green. The marginal range is the yellow, and the outside, anything that falls out basically is in the red. The little triangle is what the regional average is, and the line is where our cattle fitted in. And I'm not sure whether you can see it properly, but there's a range. The range of where our cattle killed out at is displayed there as well. We actually had 3 animals this year, or last year, that fell out because they were too heavily marbled. And I found that quite hard to believe. They were marble score 8. So when that happened, I rang them up and said I didn't see any red lines in the top corner. So obviously if they're too lowly marbled, you can see the red on the left-hand side, but there doesn't seem to be one on the right-hand side. So I was a bit bemused about that, but they didn't really have an answer for me, but I see it probably is going to be something that's going to be happening more and more. So we've got a slide here on the economics of the beef EQ. It's pretty straightforward. They're currently paying 25 cents a kilogram over a 300 kg carcass weight, which is what our target is. It equates to $75 a head. We had 70% hit rate last year, which was up from 44 the previous year. So 2014 was 44. Last year was 70%. Over 1,350 animals. That equated to $68,000 premium last year. So the criteria, as you saw, for the reserve grade is mainly it's marbling, fat colour, meat colour, pH, ossification, and weight. So the 3 things that they fall out on mainly, this is nationwide, is the first one is marbling. So 60% of the animals that fall out of the master grade are because of marbling. The second next reason is fat, so they haven't got enough rib fat. And the third one is meat colour, which is all about pH and sort of the handling side of it. So, I mean, the first 2 are easily fixed with genetics, but the second one's more about how the animals are handled. Carcass quality genetics and where we get them from. So we get most of them from Australia, and the reason for this is Australia quite a bit ahead of New Zealand, because in the early 1990s they got access to the Japanese market. And to supply the Japanese market, obviously they were wanting marbling genetics, so there was a quantum leap basically in what the Australian Angus industry focused on. So that didn't happen in New Zealand, and as a result of that, we're probably a fair bit behind the Aussies. So Rennie Lee are probably leading the charge. In fact, they're miles ahead, I'd suggest, and we're fortunate enough to have sort of dovetailed into their breeding program. And what I really liked about their program, other than the Carcass characteristics, were their breeding objectives were something that fitted very well with our own. So they only mate for 35 days, 2 cycles, got a strong background with fertility, and the Carcass stuff's for free basically. So that's just a bonus on top. I've long been a fan of marbling, and certainly Rennie Lee are leading the charge there. The other thing I'll comment on is it does take time to get these genetics through your herd. You'll get much more consistency once the females are coming through that are by those higher marbling bulls. So you can get the odd result come through that's quite pleasing if you're just using high marbling sires, but until those genetics are through your female, then you're not going to be doing it consistently. Sorry, we're going backwards. Matching EBVs to beef EQ. So not sure how clearly you can see this, but this bull here is a bull that Brian found for me at Rennie Lee this year, and he's got everything we're looking for. He's got fantastic calving ease, he's got great gestation length, birth weight from 2.6 out to 120, drops to 91 for mature cow weight. He's -9 for calving ease, days to calving. He's 7.5 for EMA. He's +2 and 2.7 for rib and rump, and he's 3.8 for IMF. And when you put his indexes through on the New Zealand system, he's $237 for the Angus Pure index, which is double average, and he's 197 for self-replacing. So these are the sort of bulls that we are targeting to take our herd to the next level. What are the EBVs we need to hit the beef EQ reserve grade? Well, obviously the most important one is IMF. As I said before, 60% are falling out because there's a lack of it. Again, because we're killing our cattle at 16 to 22 months, we've got to get as much growth in there as we possibly can. So it's very important to have 400 and 600 day growth that's really strong, and then we want them to stop growing. We want them to grow as fast as they possibly can to 2 years old and then stop growing. Rib and rump fat, again, pretty important, and eye muscle area, obviously, to negate the negatives of the fat. So, as I've said before, the challenges to the hit rates are marbling, meat colour, fat colour, ossification, and docility. So you've got to have quiet cattle, because the relationship between pH and meat colour is pretty important, and if you've got cattle that aren't quiet, it's going to cost you big time. Ossification's quite a big one too. We find that we have a much higher success rate with the beef EQ with our steers and our heifers. So once the heifers start laying down a bit of fat and a bit of what's the ossifications around the cartilage in the backbone, So once the cartilage in the backbone starts going from cartilage to bone, then the process of aging speeds up really quickly, and the meat fibre becomes a lot tougher, and it just has a negative effect on how they grade. How much marbling is enough? Well, historically we've been using bulls that are sort of 2.5 to 3.5 for IMF EBV. 3 disqualified for 8+. Last year we had a heifer in the stake of origin that marble scored 7, and 2 that marble scored 6 at 17 months off grass. The last couple of years we've been using bulls with EBVs of 3.5 to 6. So where we go from here, I don't know. It's probably only going to get better and better. So what's the relationship between the Angus Pure index and the relevance to beef EQ? Obviously, the Angus Pure index has got a fairly high weighting on 4 to 600 day. It's got a strong weighting on early maturity. So the silver fern farms people tell us that their average kill weight is 270 kilos, and they're just not finished enough. So we need cattle that mature early, but we need them to grow as fast as they possibly can to get there. So 400 and 600 day, very important. Early maturity, obviously. High weighting on marbling in the Angus Pure index, and a low mature cow weight. So there's a pretty strong correlation between the Angus Pure index and the beef EQ. What are the management tools that we need to maximize our genetic potential? So the biggest thing is minimizing stress. With our animals, we walk them to the yards the night before. We have them in a holding paddock outside the yards with silage and access to water. We don't use hunterways on them. And we've just built a double loadout ramp, because I found last year that the cattle that we were loading upstairs, I was scanning every animal onto the truck, and the animals that went upstairs that you were having to get up a bit were not grading as well as the ones that were downstairs. So we've built this ramp, and we've probably sent 3 or 4 units out so far this year, and it's just effortless. So it's pretty important. Here's a few stats on the nutrition and hit rates on the beef EQ. So we started off last year, we're killing about 40% of our animals before they go onto fodder beet, straight off grass, and we're achieving about a 66% hit rate at 17 months. Then after 50 days on fodder beet, our hit rate went up to 86%. And after 80 days on fodder beet, it went up to 93%. So definitely helps, and it's a real win-win for us. Carcass weights empty in the yards before we send them, we're getting about a 54 to 56% yield, and the carcass weights at plant about 58% yield. That's empty, obviously. So some of the key messages, the first one obviously is there's no substitute for fertility. On a scale of 1 to 10, live calves on the ground every time comes through is a 10 out of 10 versus 3 out of 10 for carcass. So it's more important to have live calves on the ground. We scan all our replacements in our commercial herd for IMF and EMA, and we use those heifers. We take the bottom 15% off every year, and we have a once bred heifer system with them, so we don't keep them as replacements. Anything that's in the bottom 15% get thrown out. The fact that they're in calf already when we scan them means that we do take a calf out of them, but we don't keep them beyond there. Genetics obviously hugely important in in the success for the Beef EQ program. Nutrition, I mean, they've got to be growing every day of their lives if they can, especially if you're targeting 300 kilos at sort of 16 to 22 months, and nutrition, extremely important as well. We had steers on red clover with a bolus inside them this spring. They did 2.25 a day for the first 60 days, and they averaged 1.75 for the duration of the 100 days that they were on the clover with a bolus inside them. So we're targeting a kilo and a half a day from the time they come off the crops on the hill country in the winter to kill date. So they've got to be growing really every day of their lives. And obviously management's pretty key. We've gone from 44% to 70%, and it's all about the little things. So we're just getting better and better every year. I'd like to think that we can get to 80% this year, and we can just keep climbing slowly. We're just learning new things all the time, but if you haven't got the genetics in the first place, and until those genetics start coming through your females, it's going to be slow going. But once you're there, it's pretty satisfying.
We've got time for a few questions. So,
yes, the results from your once calved heifers, how did they go on the carcasses?
After we've weaned the calf, they're pretty average, to be fair. Mainly fall out on ossification. Probably only about a 35% hit rate. So, yeah, they're not great. Females are hard work. An opportunity? Yeah, I think you know that the estrogen in the system that promotes the onset of ossification, it's going to be hard to work against that, Will. But I mean, we've tried everything really. We've tried to put a bit more weight on them, but you know, we've got a production system that sort of, it's a bit limiting. We don't want to be carrying those heifers through the second winter, so they need to be gone before they reach that sort of, other than the system doesn't allow for anything over 24 months, so Beef EQ won't take anything that's over 36 months.
Ceri, you talked about handful went over, marble score 8. Do you see any issues once you get more of this marbling genetics into your cow herd that you'll have topped out, you'll have gone far enough?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I spoke to Max Foods, who take most of the Beef EQ product into the States, and they come over to New Zealand every year just on a sort of a promotional type visit. And Justin Marks was telling me that they've definitely got a market for that meat, the more highly marbled stuff. The difficulty would be at this stage within New Zealand is getting enough product to actually drive a market, because you'd need the consistency and you'd also need the volume of supply. I think it's going to happen. I mean, I was talking to Gerald Hargraves earlier on, and I was making speeches about IMF 5, 6, 7 years ago, and people would look at you as if you had two heads, I mean, and I told them that one day we're going to get rewarded for marbling, and it's happened, and we'll get to the next level at some stage, but when that is, I don't know, but it'll happen.
If they weren't Angus and were probably called some other breed, starting with W, then you would probably get quite well paid for them, wouldn't you?
Yeah, you would. I mean, I've got a story about that too. I mean, we did a trial test last year, and it's not commercially sensitive or anything. It might have been 2 years ago with First Light Foods. So we killed a line of animals. First Light Foods, for those of you who are unaware, have got a Wagyu F1 program, and they've got $10 million from the government or for the PGB fund to build a market and a system for producing high quality marbled beef. And we killed several unit loads of beef, and they were compared with the F1 Wagyu cross product, and they were as good, if not better. That we then had a blind tasting, and the Mount Linton marble score 6 beef came out on top, and they were getting really excited about this product, mainly because we were able to finish the animals at least 12 months before the Wagyus were ready, because they've just got no growth. Anyway, they asked us to kill a few more carcasses and send again to their consumers overseas. That we did that, and then the phone went quiet, and I was chasing them up, and he said, listen, at the end of the day, they loved the product, but because it didn't have the Wagyu name around it, they didn't want to pay a premium for it. So the product was as good, if not better, but because it didn't have a W in front of it, sorry.
Couple quick questions, if you don't mind. Do you anticipate, with selecting for earlier maturity, that you might have maybe an increase in ossification in the future at all?
Ossification?
Yeah. It's
with the females.
With the animals you're feeding and
Yeah,
killing?
it doesn't seem to be a problem with the steers.
Okay.
But definitely with the heifers.
Okay. I was just curious. And will you look at? I noticed you had a yield side. Will you track that, and how much more have you looked at how much more you might get paid for higher yielding cattle in the system as well?
Are you talking about retail beef yield?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean that's an interesting question. I'm not chasing retail beef yield. I'm chasing a quality product, and I fully understand that the feedlot people are not interested in a lot of the cattle that we breed, but I can't afford not to have that fat in my beef cow herd. So I fully understand where the feedlot guys are coming from in terms of retail beef yield, but for me, under our climatic conditions, I just can't afford not to have that fat in our system. But I can hear you.
Who most wants the marbled meat? The export people or New Zealanders? Or is it all the same?
The question was who's wanting the marbled beef? Is it New Zealand domestic or is it export? At the moment, it's almost exclusively export, and they just can't get enough of it. They said the grass-fed's overtaken the grain-fed in Australia. I think that's true, Brian.
I think about 50 or 60% of cattle are fed on grain, but Australia's always had a lot of grass-fed product, but there's a lot more branded products of high quality grass-fed.
Yeah.
But they're not marbling like this.
Yeah. So yeah, the demand, to answer your question, the demand is 90% of it's overseas at the moment.
Angus Pure's very keen on the market.
Come and see me afterwards.
All right. Okay, we'll leave it there. And Ceri's around here for the afternoon. So thank you very much for a very informative presentation and a very practical example of genetics paying out on farm.